Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's talk consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good today, too. Thanks for asking, and thank you all for tuning in. Today on the Voice of Yoga, we will talk about the seventh stage of Kriya Yoga, Dhyana, or meditation, as the practice of divine presence. Listen as we explain why union with the divine is essential to achieve the meditative state. In this show, we will discuss meditation as a state of being and not an isolated activity. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. Join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and know the truth that makes you free. Swami, I see the title of today's show is Union with the Divine as Meditation. So can you just give us a brief summary as to what we mean by that title?
Yeah, we're really talking about meditation as a prayer. Prayer, as like we have been saying, is drawing from the divine presence and to have a continuous connection to that source of sustenance, which is really what we would call a meditative state.
You mentioned continuous source. What does that look like when we have that?
Well, then you're what is called in the kingdom of heaven on earth. That divine presence is now intelligible to you. And you're no longer fooled by the testimony of your five senses, that you're out of the law of karma and the belief in two powers, and you have fidelity to this one divine presence, which is absolute love, it's absolute goodness, and it's eternal life.
Well, I like your explanation about what meditation is. Can you review with us and maybe tell us what meditation is not?
Well, meditation is one of those all-encompassing words that can mean anything to anybody. There are a lot of people who just meditate. But theoretically, meditation is the seventh stage of Kriya Yoga, which means that there are 6 previous stages that must be achieved before what is being done can be called meditation in this model. And maybe in this show what might be helpful is if we review these 6 stages, beginning with stage 1, which are the yamas, the abstentions.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So what do we mean by abstentions? That might be a word that some people may not recognize.
Yeah, they're kind of like a code of ethics. They're rules. And the thing that we want to understand here is that it is not just about the conduct, but it's really what we're talking about. It's really about a connection. And oftentimes it's important to understand that we need the conduct in order to make the connection. Your first stage in yoga, the yamas, which yama means control. This is self-control, self-mastery that leads to this spiritual identity that we're talking about. But I found it very helpful to understand that in the framework of this spiritual science of Kriya Yoga, that in these yamas, you start to see a framework that leads to something beyond personal sense. The yamas in Kriya Yoga are ahimsa, non-injury, satya, non-lying, asteya, non-stealing, aparigraha, non-greed, and brahmacharya, non-sensuality. Of those 5, brahmacharya to me is the starting point. Brahmacharya oftentimes thought to be celibacy. The translation for brahmacharya means carrier of Brahman, which is another way of saying union with the divine. So yoga actually begins with this internalizing this divine presence within the individual. And the Bible suggests this by saying, ask in my name, or ask in my likeness. To carry Brahman or to be in spiritual likeness, we must be in spiritual identity. Non-sensuality means beyond sense-level living, which is where most of us are trapped.
I know we've been talking a lot about the five-sense mind in recent shows. Is this what you're talking about?
Yeah, mortal thought, the belief in matter, the belief that we are a corporeal, finite form.
So would you say that we would have to understand first the way that we are created, and then from there we need to not be governed by our senses?
That's exactly right. We must know ourselves in the way that we are known by the Creator in order to open this channel of communication. And that's why union with the divine is a meditative state.
How would we understand, like you said, that the Creator knows us as the way He created us, but He wouldn't have created us to be in this human form with a five-sense mind?
Yeah, those are some of the things that we're moving out of, which is what we refer to as the old theology. And really, most of what we're talking about here we got from Mary Baker Eddy, Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures. She really helps us unbox the Bible and start to see it as instruction to do something. She found this out in reading Genesis, that Genesis 1 is really about a divine creation. God made everything, and everything is very good. And then as you continue in the Bible, you come to Genesis 2, Genesis 3, which is this secondary creation, which is really the human thought about this divine creation. We're trapped in this mode of mortal thinking. And so a big part of these spiritual disciplines is educating people in how to get out of that regressive pattern, that false sense of existence.
Is it our level of consciousness that keeps us coming back to be experiencing the human life?
Yeah, the term in yoga is called avidya, ignorance. And basically we are mistaking the impermanent for the permanent. As long as we continue to abide in this sense level acceptance, then we continue to believe in two powers instead of the one divine presence. And so as we start to unbox the spiritual science of Kriya Yoga, we start to see that it was a template, it was a format in how to make this shift in consciousness from a personal sense of self to spiritual identity.
So when we're talking about union with the divine, if we're already born as a reflection of our divinity, of the Creator, aren't we already there?
Right. We are already there. And there is no lack of divine presence. We're there. We're just unaware that we are there. And our belief in this sense level logic that we have accepted, and our belief in matter, the physical appearance of things, keeps us trapped in this regressive pattern. And then as we start to go further with the spiritual science of yoga, we go into the second stage, which is niyam, the observances. And the observances are shaucha, which is purification, contentment, santosha, austerity, tapas, sacred study, svadhyaya, and attunement to the absolute, which is ishva pranidhana. Now, greater human potential isn't magic, but it is physics. It's like attracts like. And two things can't occupy the same space at the same time. So we can't be a mortal creature and spiritual at the same time. And the Bible supports this, where Jesus says we can't serve two masters. And that the Bible tells us that we must put off the old man. And for us to sow to the flesh is death. For us to sow to the spirit is life. These are important clues that we can start to use. And this thing of purification in Kriya Yoga is to purify ourselves physically, mentally, and conceptually, so that we can become a pure channel for the presence of this divine law, this divine power, this one divine life.
Well, so if we come back into this world to be born again as a human, so when we incarnate, can we make that decision to not incarnate and live from matter and mind, but when we incarnate into a human being, we can already have this divine presence, this knowledge and awareness?
Well, I would imagine all of that would depend on where you are karmically. That to answer your question, I'm sure that it is quite possible to achieve a level of consciousness that you are on the threshold of this divine awakening and still kind of attached to material thought, material law, that you're somewhere in the middle. When you do incarnate, you may have a stronger inclination towards the spiritual. But it's very important, I think, to understand that these spiritual disciplines were set up to enable us to initiate something that, and I really like what we would say in Kriya Yoga, that the alchemists believe that God, or this creation that we were living in, wasn't perfect. And that God depended upon the human to help make this false creation perfect. And so the human isn't some lowly worm of creature seeking redemption, but is an intricate part of this evolution of consciousness. But it is our responsibility to work out our own salvation, is what Mary Baker Eddy would call it. That we need to do something other than living instinctually. By thinking, breathing, eating, sleeping, fornicating, we can survive, but we're not growing. That in order for us to break this pattern, to break this regressive cycle, some tampering has to happen. And these disciplines are designed to initiate this process, this revelation. But like you're saying, I mean, it's not something that we do. It's something that's already done, and all we have to do is become aware of its presence.
So I know we talk about purifying ourselves from these unnecessary dependencies to try to get us out of living from, what you say, fear and limitation. So we have to understand that if we draw from fear and limitation, that's what we get.
Right. That's the physics of spirituality. That's the like attracts like. And so if we have a belief in matter, we're in the trap. And what we're trying to learn is how to give up this mortal sense of identity and assume a spiritual, eternal sense of identity.
All right, well, we're going to pause right here to hear a word from our sponsors. So listeners, we'll be back with you in just a few moments. Kriya Yoga Theory 1, Human Development and 8 Essential Stages of Kriya Yoga. This program is a comprehensive course that will help you get your arms around the science of Kriya Yoga. It provides a clear understanding of the goals and objectives behind yoga, along with the physics of spirituality. It includes the practices, supportive concepts of Kriya Yoga, and the process in human development, apotheosis, the process of the human becoming divine. A complete guide on how to become a human in the adult state. Get the light in your soul and experience the simplicity and joy of union with the divine. This course is available in live classes at the ashram or online with 8 videos or 4 CDs. Visit our website, www.ipdtransform.com, for more information. Welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So, Swami, before the break, we were talking about unnecessary dependencies, and if we draw from fear and limitation, that's what we get. If we draw from truth and wholeness, we become spirit. But can we just kind of break this down maybe a little bit more for our readers?
Yeah, when we incarnate, we are drawing from matter and mind, which is fear and limitation. And we must purify ourselves from this unnecessary dependency and then replace it with spirit, which is truth and wholeness. If we draw from fear and limitation, like you say, we become fear and limitation. We're in the trap. We're in the cycle of death and rebirth. But if we draw from truth and wholeness, we become spirit.
I know I had a conversation with you the other day, and I'm practicing trying to realize and know that everything around me is spirit. And I think I was telling you that I was people watching one day, and I'm still placing a judgment on people first before I notice them as being spirit. What can you tell us that we could do, that we can practice to maybe get ourselves out of that trap, out of that judgment trap?
Yeah, like you're saying, you have to practice. And like the old saying is, practice makes perfect only when practice is perfect. So making your mind an avenue of awareness for the presence of this one divine life becomes your practice. Until that one divine life actually starts to acknowledge you, then divine mind will take over the scientific government of your being. That's when there is no longer a personal sense of I. You step out of sense level living, and now you're abiding in this spiritual truth of being. Just like what you're saying, I found employing these strategies that we're talking about here in Kriya Yoga can be quite helpful. And doesn't really seem to happen all at once. It seems to reveal itself little by little. And as we start to get more and more proficient in seeing the truth of being, where the 5 senses is reporting something that does not have divine quality, it becomes your default response is to reject the 5 sense appearance and know it for what it is. It's just a reflection. It's just a thought about what is really there. And becoming accustomed to piercing through that appearance becomes, I want to say, your practice.
Well, the next stage we have is stage 3, which is asana, which means posture. Why is that important for trying to become union with the divine?
We've been continuously working with the formula, how we think is what we become. And it's very important to understand that physical appearance isn't real at this point, that the physical appearance is just the reflection of what is real. It's just an image or a thought about this divine presence, which is the perfection of being. And if the clues that we are getting from our physical appearance do not have divine qualities. If we are seeing lack, limitation, we are seeing defect in this external appearance, we must understand that divine mind is perfect. And so we're not thinking from divine mind at that point, that there's something in our consciousness that is revealing these mortal conditions. And where we really want to make the adjustment is not in the physical body, but we want to make the adjustment in consciousness, in how I'm thinking. And what we have really introduced into our asana classes is this idea of forsaking human thinking. Because it's not about trying, it's not about thinking, and it's not about believing. It's really about knowing the truth and making your mind an avenue of awareness for the presence of divine mind and forsaking this mortal sense of an external appearance.
So the next stage is stage 4, pranayama. So what does the control of prana have to do with this union with the divine?
Yeah, see, prana in Kriya Yoga is the life force. It's the divine presence. And there is a direct correlation between the thinking process and this divine presence. And the direct relationship between this life-sustaining force and thought is that the duration of a thought equals the duration of a breath. Now, breath on a physical level would be your number 2 life-sustaining force. Now, what I've found through my own experiences is that you can't even mistake breath for prana. That breath is invisible but tangible. And if you are accepting breath as your symbol for validation, you're still in the trap because you're drawing from duality. You're drawing from a belief in matter, which pulls you into this belief in 2 powers. There is life and death at that level. Now, through the application of various breathing and thinking exercises, we develop control of this life force, which lifts us into this unified state of thinking with divine mind, which is the absolute. So we transcend the limits of mortal thought, but we're actually employing these exercises with this intention in mind.
All right, so next up is stage 5, pratyahara, sense withdrawal. Can you break that down for us?
Yeah, to me, this is one of the most misunderstood phases in development, sense withdrawal. That truth or wholeness, oneness, does not report in a 5-sense mind. And one must transcend duality by lifting consciousness into this unified state. Because again, how we think is what we become. And these 3 modes of mortal thought must be left in order to access this divine mind.
Now, stage 6, dharana, means concentration. What does that mean for us?
Concentration is our ability to block out unrelated matter, focus on the task at hand. And in this model, Kriya Yoga, our initial instruction is to train the mind to serve spirit and to train the body to accept spirit as your symbol for validation. This makes the mind an avenue of awareness for the presence of the divine. And by blocking out all the unrelated matter and focusing on spirit, we start to make human thought buoyant. Now, provided that we have given up a belief in matter, we've given up our material moorings, that will enable us to lift ourselves out of this false sense of existence and now to start to abide in the truth of our being, that we are eternal spiritual being. You step out of the changing conditions of a personal mentality, which is where most of us are trapped. We're still thinking humanly. We're still thinking on a sense level of logic, as opposed to thinking with this divine presence, divine mind.
All right, so I guess now we move on to stage 7. Dhyana, what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, the meditative state, the true meditative state really is, I really like what Mary Baker Eddy calls praying unceasingly, that you are drawing from this invisible, intangible, eternal life force. And your whole sense of well-being is established in the fact that you're spirit. You're not a physical body with an expiration date. And you're not trying to manage the instincts and the appetites of the physical body. You're not trying to manage things from a human level of understanding. That you are now operating from a spiritual sense of identity. And from that spiritual sense, the first thing you'll notice is that there's no fear. If you are an eternal spiritual being, you no longer have the instincts and the appetites of a physical form to hamper your vision, hamper your ability to see the truth of your being. And as you abide in this divine presence and you start to let it live you, you give up personal will and you start to allow this divine presence to express itself through you. The formula won't change. How we think is what we become, but divine mind is the perfection of being. And it's very important to understand that divine mind does not think in human terms. It doesn't think with things, events. It transcends time and space. It transcends here and now. It transcends past, present, future. Spirit is the eternal now. Everything is happening here and now. It is the absolute. It is the presence of the one divine mind, the creative principle of this universe. There are no opposing forces in spirit. Spirit is one.
I like what we said in the beginning of the show, in the opening, and that meditation is a state of being, and it's not an isolated activity. It's not something that you just decide to go in another room and just meditate. It should be something that is it's a ceaseless, constant state.
Right. And that, again, is what we were talking about. A lot of people go and they meditate. And then I really like what Kriyananda used to say about that. He said most people would go and they would be gathering wool for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours. You're still a human thinking about spirit. And in order to really activate this divine law, you must be in spiritual identity.
Well, it's about that time to start closing down our show for today. So listeners, please visit the website, www.ipdtransform.com. And once you're there, 3/4 of the way down on the homepage, you'll see a section entitled Swami Says Recent Posts. And you'll be able to click on some shows there to continue and further your learning experiences. So Swami, do you have any other final thoughts about today's program?
Well, I would like to encourage everybody to stay in the presence of the divine and maintain that meditative state of being throughout the course of their day. And with that, namaste.
And thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton, along with Swami Jayananda, signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.